Okay. So part two. So what he's saying is that during the time that all the societies and economies destroyed during World War II, as they rebuilt and we were no longer they could supply their own markets, that the move that, and this is probably, I agree with this because I mean it jives with my sense of things. Let me put it that way. He said from the '60s, onward, from the sort of right, I mean, the '60s onward. He said the capitalist class used the strategy which they sort of always used, but then really started using it, which is to see if they could buy off, to sort of buy off the poor, to keep everything. And he said, and even to the point of taking potential radicals and creating a situation where they would be sort of the educational system directing them into sort of being sort of a social worker, a manager of a public housing, then creating the government assistance of any number of things to try to sort of keep it from coming to the surface that black people are the way he's sort of putting it. And but the problem is, he said that the problem from the standpoint of the owners is that the civil rights movement on every and everything that goes along with that was empowering African American people, was really empowering African American people, but also was empowering African American people. Let me put it that way. That he said that the labor, which is not the same, he's sort of differentiating, I think it's right, between the sort of unions, but then just no, but then there's another group that's because of the racism of the society and everything, people who are extremely poor and destitute in a racist society. That's not the same as. So you see, unions are very powerful, but at the same time, you have a mass of people who are both historically underprivileged and very, very, very poor, but they're being empowered because the civil rights movement, of course, is succeeding. So that the owners can't really buy off the poor. They can't sort of just do it where it was there become such people. It's the society's becoming less racist. That this is what he's saying, that it's becoming less racist, that people are empowered, that there's leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. that they can't sort of just keep sort of making a situation where there isn't there where the situation for poor black people is really changing. So in terms of before they could get away with sort of buying everybody off in a way that didn't help, but kept it from being, because they were disempowered. But by the '60s, black people are becoming empowered. And the thing is that he's saying that the sort of situation of the owners is in their sector, because all the economies that had been destroyed in World War II are now rebuilt and supplying their own markets. That capitalists are facing this sort of overproduction problem and don't have all these overseas markets anymore. Meanwhile, labor unions are more powerful than they've ever been. Wages are actually going up, and they're in a very powerful position. And poor black people are becoming empowered by the civil rights movement. So they have, he said, two problems. The problem is, one, what do they do if no one is homeless and destitute and held down and imprisoned. Like if you have a empowered, if African American people are empowered to rise up and move, out of being in that situation, then workers aren't scared of their own. Like it was, they're not. It was if they don't have something that's worse than like in other words, like it need that for this kind of capitalism to function, it needs desperate poverty, because if there isn't if no one's desperate and poor and turning to crime and all that, if there is, and homeless, then workers aren't scared and they'll demand higher wages. They don't have a situation where they can't have the working class and unions and things this powerful and this confident, and that they really need destitute people so that they can. Workers are becoming empowered even more because the whole society is getting more empowered, and they sort of need this kind of capitalism. He's saying that abject poverty is an essential feature of the system that we have, because without it, workers are too empowered themselves, because there isn't, like, they can't. That's how he puts it. Okay. He then describes what we talk about all the time, which is this what's called the neoliberal project, which is they're designing stuff at like the Chicago School of Economics that they decide if this is what's happening, black people are becoming empowered. And it's naturally they have the right moral ground on their side. The unions are very powerful, but capitalists are facing a problem where there's overproduction and there aren't all these overseas markets anymore. So they decide in their way that only like PhDs and economists can look at things, that they should reconceptualize their relationship to labor. Because if they can do something that breaks the power of unions, and at the same time if they can make a situation where black people are no longer empowered and are destitute, then the whole thing will work for them. Workers will be they do this whole thing where they wage a kind of class war, but part of it includes needing a sort of desperate population as otherwise, in other words, so that workers will not be they're saying that the kind of society, they don't want the kind of society where the whole is benefiting, because this kind of sort of exploitive, this type of exploitive version of capitalism that's not ethical, that's racist, that's this way, that we have this different kind of business class that's like sadistic towards everyone else and doesn't want the whole to benefit, doesn't have that picture of things. Like their picture of things is sort of evil with regard. It was the Chomsky always says how like the right wing press in Europe had been writing for years. They can't believe how badly, like at different points, like American workers are treated. Like they can't believe the behavior of the capitalist class in America. Like it's something like unfamiliar to them. They sort of hate the poor and like hate workers, and they want it like sort of all, and they want that's how our society's business run by a class conscious business class that's unfamiliar to Europeans. And he's saying, so the neoliberal project that like breaks breaks the unions by doing things like building excess capacity and saying we'll just outsource your job and this and that and this, but that it also needs a destitute population so the position of the owners can be, you're lucky you have a job at all. That is, even if they break the sort of unions, there's still work available. How do you stop, there's organized, he's saying there's organized attempts to get wages up, but there's also unorganized attempts. So he's saying they need a way to threaten building excess capacity and all that, and doing all these different things, and putting money into automation, even though it's cost prohibitive, to threaten them with that. That they also need a way to have people who, let's say, aren't organized but are still asking for higher wages, to have them sort of feel lucky they have a job. So they need a destitute population. And that this version of capitalism and this type of business class requires abject poverty and homelessness as part of the way in which they're threatening workers all the time. And then Chomsky says he views a lot of these things they're doing with the harshening of not punishment in terms of just the maximum, these mandatory minimums, the way they're treating this African American population that's in prison because they have no work, there's nothing for them to do except try to go in the underground economy. He's the very fact that they've brought back chain gangs and that you can see that on TV. Why are they bringing back chain gangs? As though we're back in, he said it's a form of it scares workers. If they feel lucky they have a job, they're seeing black people on these shows where they show what's happening in prison, walking around in chains, they say, oh, I'm lucky I have a job, things must be really bad, it's scary out there, they're lucky they have a job. And that this type of exploitive capitalism needs a desperate population, and that black people are the ones they're putting into that situation, is the way he sees it. And that sounds right to me. That's a good, that jives with my sense of things.